The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Good afternoon and welcome to Chit Chatting with Jocelyn. I'm really glad that you could join us today. I have my co-host, Ms. Karen Testerman, welcome, and a fabulous guest who's not been here, and we are trying to figure it out, we think 2 years, Dan McGrath from Jester Technology.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. Evening. Good evening. Oh, you know, good, happy, cold out there.
Yes.
Happy New Year and all that good stuff.
Happy 2022.
And supposedly we're having winter
tomorrow?
I
we
heard. Are we? Is it for real?
Well, it's off and on. I mean, it just depends upon which way the wind blows.
Which
and it depends upon where the wind comes from, right? Who knows where the wind comes from?
Isn't it kind of amazing that it's New Hampshire and it's January? Isn't it supposed to have
Isn't it supposed to have?
Isn't this supposed
What's
to have
really unusual is that in Maryland, depending upon where you were in Maryland, you got hit with, I think it was almost 70-degree weather, 52 to 70, someplace in there on one day, and the next day they had 11 inches of snow.
Yep. That's what I'm hearing in Colorado. Same thing.
Well, the beauty of Maryland, actually, I'm sorry, it was Virginia, that the wake-up call that happened 2 days ago.
And I-95 got shut down.
So what does that actually expose?
That they don't have any plows or salt or have any way to ability to take care of that?
They're not supposed to have any plows because it's a swamp. It's warm. It's actually...
It's rare.
It's very rare that they get
Wait a
snow.
minute. It's a swamp?
It's a swamp. Hence the swamp. What it actually exposes is when you take a look at our infrastructure. And I know this is not for the agenda that we have on the first, but...
That's okay. We can always flip it.
The wonderful part of what's happened or the exposure is you had cars on that highway strip for 20 hours. If they were electric, how long would they have lasted?
Less time than that.
3 hours.
Right.
And now how do you recharge them? So you have a 50-mile backup.
Well, as it turns out, they had people that were running out of petrol fuel.
But that's
petroleum type fuel.
As insane as that is. So 20 hours of idling off and on people were shutting their cars off, but it was ridiculously cold. So people can actually go and fill quickly with a gas can. And all you need is 1 gallon. You're going to get 20 miles. You can get to the next
Correct.
off-ramp.
You can go fill up at the next gas station. But what do the electric ones do?
Yes, how long does it take to charge an electric
6 hours.
car? So not only are you locked down for the 20 hours, you now have to bring a charging station to the highway, plug in 1 car at 6 hours at a time. So now what is the future of our infrastructure as we take a look at our current politicians that want to get rid of fossil fuel and they want to go to all electric?
Well, they want to go to all electric, and they know it's not going to happen because they don't have the batteries that can hold the charge for long enough. And then the charge takes 6 hours, and then it takes oil.
Well,
not only
charge.
that,
so
but
that
not
kind of
only
blows that whole
that,
theory, doesn't it?
You have to use sun or wind in order to generate the electricity to generate that, and that's not even consistent.
Correct.
Well, that's the fun part of what ends up happening is there's a quote that I'm going to steal from a coworker is everyone's looking for heaven, but no one wants to die. So they're looking for heaven, but they don't want to actually tell the truth that, well, yes, you can go all electric, but what's going to happen in the state of New Hampshire? What's going to happen in New York, Pennsylvania, when you decide to go all electric, no fossil fuel, and there's a snowstorm?
Ask Vermont.
Yeah.
They contract with Seabrook to see if they need any extra fuel after they've gone through their poop and their sun and their wind. I say poop because they did actually
use the other word.
No, they were actually looking into how do you utilize cow poop to get energy.
Oh, okay.
Well, there's 5 people that live there, so they can get away with it.
Something, methane gas, and capture it, and you know, some of you scientist people could figure that
well,
out.
but I've been trying to figure that out since they started.
Since they said
the
it.
whole thing about this climate change, and we have to get rid of carbon dioxide and carbon fuels and so forth. And you know what? Everything's organic. Anything living is organic. That means it's got a carbon molecule to it.
Right.
So if we eliminate it all, then we won't have any
die.
life or plants or animals or anything.
But isn't that actually the plan?
Yes. Just like if we all go electric today, if we all go electric, you know, and it doesn't work and they don't update the batteries and they can't get it so that it's less than 6 hours to charge that car, well, then you don't need the car. And oh, by the way, if you live in Boston,
you don't need the car.
You don't need the car.
But the other part of that is they're not talking about the carbon or the fuel that it requires to make all of the batteries and the car itself that is completely against, well, it's completely against all of this, the mantra that they're out here parroting about how it's going to save the climate, and yet it's also one of the biggest contributors to the destruction of
destruction. Yep.
Well,
go ahead.
Because the key component that they're wrestling with that's not being advertised is once the battery is done being recharged, what happens to the battery?
It gets buried in the battery cemetery, because in France they have entire fields, hundreds and thousands of.
And why does it get buried?
Because
it's radioactive and nuclear.
I was going to say it's got the lithium
so it's radioactive and nuclear, and you can't actually reuse that because they've recharged it over and over again. So ultimately what they're doing is they're trying to create more nuclear waste by using an electric car.
You heard that here, people.
It's kind of fun.
It is kind of fun.
Well, but if you've got unspent nuclear power, then you can also get a nuclear reactor and use
That's a different story. That's unspent nuclear power from, let's say, Seabrook.
Right.
You can still use that energy, but no one wants to touch it. A nuclear, the battery that's within inside is nuclear waste.
Oh, I see.
And they can't use, because they can't use the battery anymore because they've reached, it's like taking a rechargeable battery that eventually dies over the course
of a life, yeah.
And that's the exact same thing that's happening with these cars. Now, the nuclear waste from Seabrook, that's a completely different story.
Because those are we talked about this before, because we had those two very nice gentlemen that came here, and I can't remember their names, but
Steve and I can't remember his name.
I know Stephen was
something
on the tip of my tongue. One was from Virginia, and one was from
Minnesota.
And they were talking about the fuel cells from nuclear plants, and that only 10% was ever used.
Yes.
They had no way. They didn't have the technology to use the whole amount. And so they came up with a technology, a new nuclear technology that would take those, tell me if I'm wrong, Karen, and it would use it all up. So all these fuel cells that had whatever amount left in them, they could use them, and then we wouldn't be paying to store them with our tax money.
Well,
so we bought them, we stored them, and they're not used
a certain
up.
amount. The reality is that there's probably 250 years worth of stored energy right now in Seabrook. And what we need is someone at any state where there is a nuclear power plant with the stored cells to say that they will receive any unspent nuclear waste. Well, or unspent nuclear power. The reality is that they will never ever be the recipient. It's a matter of wordsmithing to a certain extent. And the reality is that if you have a governor that says yes, like the governor of New Hampshire, who says it's all a federal problem anyway, but if you had a governor that said, we will do this, but our stipulation is that $43 billion that is down in Washington, D.C. that's set aside for the dealing with this unspent nuclear power. If that stipulation would be, we will do this if you will set up a lab here in my state that will now look into building the alternative reactors that we could use. And the nice thing about these reactors is that they're small and they could be small geographical
You can
things.
place them in areas that generate.
Right. Well, you could place them in an area and not be dependent upon the whole big grid.
Right. It's a much smaller footprint.
Right.
So-
and you could have multiple of these plants.
Here's the counter to the issue with what just happened in Virginia. You can actually take one of these little off-site reactors, granted you're going to have to protect them against any possible thing of terrorism, which one could argue doesn't exist because you notice we haven't seen any. Just throwing it out there as a side note. But you take that energy and power and you actually make a grid or a highway system that as an electric car is rolling, you are charging that car at all times.
Oh, that would be cool.
But the problem that it comes from is how do you create that charge, which you can't do because you don't have the power, but who also wants to go down the path of nuclear energy?
Except that I believe Steve was saying that this nuclear technology, this new technology, is not as dangerous or remotely similar to Seabrook and all of those.
Most of it isn't as dangerous
Right,
as
anyway.
the hype was all about. I mean, that was all part of the propaganda. But it's fascinating how we don't want to touch these things because we've listened to the propaganda and we've not gone out and done the research.
Well, the key of listening to the propaganda, big picture, one of the things that no one wants to talk about, you have a book on Bitcoin right in front of you. How do you mine Bitcoin?
With little 5-year-olds going down into little mines, and
that's what you'd like to think. No, it's an energy thing. It's ultimately a power source of supercomputers going through puzzles or algorithms to generate Bitcoin.
Is Bitcoin an actual coin, or
No.
It's a phantom in the?
It's a chit made up on a computer system.
Excuse me, don't swear on my show.
Thank you very much. That was CH.
Chit, C-H-I-T.
So, the beauty of Bitcoin, when you actually start applying where the supercomputers house, and then you start looking at rolling blackouts. So in California during the summer, what happens?
They have rolling blackouts.
And where are the supercomputers that are doing all the Bitcoin
in California?
Amazing.
But aren't the rest of them all in the Three Gorges in China?
Why do you think they dammed the Three Gorges to try to generate more energy so they could have more supercomputers? The argument is this nuclear waste that's coming out of Seabrook could be applied to the supercomputers to actually generate the energy needed and take the supercomputers off the grid. So that the problem that we're seeing with our electrical grid in areas like Texas, California, that is strictly Bitcoin. So when you see, it's strictly because of Bitcoin. It's the supercomputers sucking in energy, and then they're going to tell the general public, sorry, you're going to go without power for however many hours so we can go mine for Bitcoin.
Which, by the way, ISO New England is already predicted for New England area that we will have rolling brownouts and blackouts starting in 2024, I think it is.
Isn't that lovely? Isn't that lovely? So, we're all
And they
supposed
know
to freeze.
But so they know it's coming.
Yep, but they're doing nothing about it.
Because why?
Because I'm pretty sure somebody's going to make a boatload of money on it.
So a lot of it is not.
You tell me that all the time.
It's not a conspiracy theory because they keep telling us exactly what they're going to do.
Exactly.
And if we just listen to what they're going to do, like in the new Matrix movie or whatever it is,
I find it kind of ironic that the Matrix movie came out and people went to go see that. Because you have to wear a mask in Nashua in order to go see a movie about waking up.
You have to wear a mask anywhere in Nashua. You're watching these people walking down the street in a mask, in their car with the windows closed, driving with a mask.
But the thing is that, so I went up to Madison. There's
Wisconsin?
a Madison, New Hampshire.
I was in Madison, Wisconsin a couple months ago.
Were you?
Never heard of Madison, New Hampshire.
There is a Madison, New Hampshire. And it's very interesting because I walked across the street and they had actually given this business a cease and desist order because they would not require facial coverings.
Face diapers?
And so these people contacted a national attorney who turned around and talked to the governor's office, and all of a sudden, the cease and desist order went away. I wonder why. Because they really, well, there's really no authority to do so.
So there is no authority. What the federal government did 2 weeks ago with your current president, Joe Biden.
It's not mine. Oh my God.
Like how I did that.
I did. That's my dad's trick. You know, my dad used to say, "Your uncle."
Your uncle. Yeah, not my president.
So as he walked away from the federal, saying there is no federal solution.
Yep.
So there is no mandate.
Right.
And now, so take that from a federal level. Unfortunately for the state of New Hampshire, the governor has actually never reimposed the mandate. So you can't actually constitutionally in the city of Nashua state that you have to wear a face mask. Yeah. They cannot. Yes, I take that back.
Well, they can, but they're not.
But you don't have to comply.
You do not have.
And they
the
can't
individual
take you to court.
You can. The ability to file lawsuit in the actual one that really works is called a civil lawsuit. So let's say, God forbid, a police officer does decide in the city of Nashua to enforce somebody not wearing a mask. You just sue that police officer civilly. Now, they have immunity from prosecution, but civilly, they're still going to pay personally for what they've done. The civil lawsuit will win every single time because if you look at the structure of our government, since it's not on a federal level and the governor has not made it a law, mayors can't just make up.
The governor can't make it a law. It has to be the legislature.
Okay, well,
sorry.
I know you want to say it. And I know the president can't make it because it's got to come out of Congress.
Correct.
I get that.
But that's what
I'm trying to bring the level.
Go ahead.
So what's great is a mayor in any city, I don't care where you are in the United States, cannot make up law that's forced on everyone.
No, they can't.
Only the people that under their authority, under their employment.
What's interesting why we bring it up is you bring up The Matrix. Is The Matrix, I'm assuming you've seen it.
I have not.
Okay, it's now an incredibly waste of time. And anybody that's actually a fan, yes, I'm looking at you, you're pathetic. The reason why you're pathetic is The Matrix is all about how this isn't real. Computers took over, put everyone in pods for energy, and you're basically in a dreamscape.
Right.
And what you need to do is break out of that. And you need to wake up and blah, blah, blah. You'll be set free.
Is that the red pill thing they talk about? Okay.
These losers that believe in The Matrix are putting on masks to go watch a movie about breaking away from government control. There's no irony. There's no, you're not a pathetic human being. Come on.
That's like the other day we had this discussion, right, about taking the knee.
Yep.
And what really subliminally they're saying, while we in this country fought against Britain because we did not want to comply with the king, right? We wanted to be the people were responsible for their own liberty.
Yep.
That by taking the knee, they were saying that we no longer wanted our liberty. We wanted to go back to the monarchy type thing, right? So I posed that, and of course the millennials or the 19, 20, 22-year-old. Oh, you just don't understand. You're just taking it all out of context.
Oh, we're taking it out of context. Hey.
So, we can't look at it from another perspective because they know it all. I mean,
it's not that they know it all.
It's all they've been taught.
Well, it's not even all they taught. The reality is they want everything for free.
Right. Sure. And it's all about me.
And you don't blame them. Who wouldn't want to live in, you live in the Matrix. You're all going to be taken care of.
Yep.
They believe that because that's what they're taught.
So is that what happens in Social Security?
No, you pay into it. You pay into a system for the promise that you won't get anything back. It's just like the tax system.
Well, it's a tax. It's always been a tax.
Yes.
But most people don't think it's a tax. Most people think it's going into a bank account for you, but it's not.
No.
Correct.
Never has been.
No, well, it depends on who you are. If you play the cards correctly, which what I do for people, is I can show them exactly how you can beat the federal government. The 99.9% of the people that I'll never talk to, that means you, yeah, you're gonna get screwed. Sorry, you're gonna lose it all. And that's what's I believe we'll talk about.
We're going to talk about in the next next half.
The fun part of 2022 or this year is for 100% of the small minority of a certain group of people with inside of Medicare, every single one of them, and you've reached IRMMA, correct?
Oh yeah.
Your Social Security check, officially, everyone went down.
Yeah.
Everyone that reaches this thing called IRMMA
Yep.
is going to see a loss of their Social Security check. And it's one more way that the government is making people take a knee.
Wow.
It's kind of fun.
Not really, but yeah.
Well, it's as a third party trying to speak to dumb people that believe they're intelligent because they have initials after their name. It's quite fun.
So all of this last year and a half, 2 years, however you want to position it, in a way was a real wake-up call for people that we've been buying into for several years now, that someone who has initials behind their name because they have gone for a certain certification, qualification, whatever it might be, are knowledgeable and that they are looking out for you.
Well, that's right.
And not
true.
necessarily.
Not even close.
Not even close, because what they're doing is they're qualifying so they can keep their job. God bless you.
Thank you for saying God.
They're making sure that they can qualify for their job so they can get paid, so they can do whatever it is that gives them paycheck, not because they're looking out for the betterment of anybody.
Correct.
No. Well, that's what's
So
great
we
about-
can't trust any of them.
Well, that's the great thing about COVID is what it's actually done is it's exposed every entity for what they really are. So if you look at the teachers, what is the real entity? It's proven they don't want to work.
Right. Well, we've got the teachers union came out on Tuesday and said that we want to go back to remote learning, period, end of discussion. And it's already started in Chicago. And somebody put that on social media. And I was just like, yes. So you want to go remote? Do it. Fire them all. Get rid of the teachers unions. Get rid of all the contracts.
But
because
you
you know
can't do
what?
that.
No, I know.
No,
but
because
but the problem is that we have to work so hard
I'm
to create online learning that has been in existence
try VLAX.
since before VLAX. My daughter did online training when she was in college.
Yep.
I mean, in high school, which is almost 30 years ago that she did that. So you tell me that
you've got to reinvent
the wheel. I don't understand. Calvert education has been around for homeschooling because of the State Department being in all these different countries all over these years.
But here's the happy
for
thing.
50 or 60 years now, and we now have to recreate how to do that.
Well, it's insane. But the funnier part that I think Dan would agree with me is, okay, you want remote learning? Bye-bye. We don't need the buildings. We don't need the buses.
I agree.
We don't need the buses. We don't need the nurse.
Oh, no.
We don't need the maintenance
We need
guy.
the buses so that we can deliver the meals to all of the children.
We don't need any of that because you just decided, teachers union, that you're going to do everything remotely. We need none of it. So you don't need any property taxes whatsoever. Period.
The fun part of where you're going with that is it'll be in the next segment, there was no fanfare, no one actually paid attention. So the biggest change to Medicare in 2021 was the fact that the state of New York basically rescinded the majority of public employees' pensions. They completely changed the pension structure.
Wow.
Really?
without anyone knowing. And they gave them, it's called reverse approval. So they basically mailed out letters over Labor Day weekend. So basically Thursday or Wednesday before Labor Day, they mailed out letters, got to everybody on Friday, and said, you have until the end
Monday.
well, yeah, well, not Monday, but you have like the end of September to sign this and saying, I don't want it. If you don't mail it back, you want to be in the new plan. Well, most people weren't around to get it. Mail stacks up. It's just one more thing that came. And if you look at the packaging, the way New York did it, it was kind of genius, is it looked like a throwaway. It's just one of these other things that you're getting as a marketing piece or propaganda piece. So ultimately what the plan was, or the program was, is it physically changed the healthcare pension of all the public employees.
So we can do that for the teachers union.
So the reason why this becomes huge is if it starts in New York, which has the second largest pension system behind California. CalPERS just happens to be larger just because it's California's just
We've got the same
paper.
problem here.
Hang on to that thought for a second, because I think what we're going to do is we'll take a quick break, we'll come back, and we're just going to dive right from there about the teachers unions, the money, and then we can go into the IRS, the 1099Ks, and what the craziness is that's going on since 2020, and how we've all been deceived and gone to sleep. And,
Well, so that's
been scaredy cats.
back to the original statement, is that was the beauty of this last year and a half or 2 years, is
the
that
awakening.
people have had to be forcefully had to have certain situations. They've been at home where they weren't before, and they've had time to get on the internet and do some real deep diving. And maybe not all of it was factual or whatever, but they've had time to also realize that we've been being sold a big bill of goods
Well, you can
for
say-
many years.
You can say the word lie because 46 said it multiple times today in his speech. So I've always said that a lie is a lie. So 46 said lie throughout his speech this morning. So I think it's legit to use that word.
Well, I don't want to copy lie.
Well, I don't want to copy it, but it used the real
gosh.
word.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. All right. So this is Chit Chatting with Jocelyn, and we have Karen Testerman and Dan McGrath, and we're going to be right back in 2 seconds, and we're going to go on to the really, really hardcore stuff. Welcome back. Here we are. We have Karen Testerman, and she's giggling because that's what we just got finished doing, and Dan McGrath. And we are into the second half. We're going to deep dive a little bit more into the expertise from that Dan has with Jester Technologies. What is IRMMA? What is the IRS doing? What is Social Security? What is Medicare? And what does it mean to you? Take it away, Dan.
Wow, that's thank you for dumping that on my on
You
my
can
plate.
handle it.
Ooh,
All
glad I'm
those years
sitting
with
to
us.
the left.
Okay, well let's talk about you on the first half. You were talking about that the state of New York in 2021 really pulled.
So yeah, the fun part of what's going on because of COVID, well, as we were discussing about how COVID has exposed entities from everything from physicians. We now clearly know physicians do things for money, not for.
Correct.
And it's
That
not
there's
all
a price
physicians.
tag, right.
There's a price tag with some physicians, as we're finding out with unions, especially the teachers union. They want to work from home. They don't want to go into school. What we're finding out is it's basically being played into the hands of what the government is. As Karen made a mention, the biggest problem that every state has when it comes to fiscal responsibilities
Pensions.
or obligations is the pensions.
Right.
The biggest part of the pension isn't the money. You can always ask the Federal Reserve to print money
Right.
and just give it to people. Granted, it makes the value of that money worthless, as we're seeing
Finding
as you
out.
go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
The hardest part is actually paying for their health care.
Right.
Now, what happened in the state of New York it started happening in June, came official, or the mailings came out in August, September, became official in October, is they've changed the whole pension system of the public employees. So the public employees in the state of New York had the best health insurance coverage behind Congress. There's nothing better besides the state of New York. They paid for everything with the exception of what is known as catastrophic coverage. So they paid for your Medicare premiums, because when a public employee reaches the age of 65 and they're retired, they go on to Medicare.
Right.
In the state of New York, in the state of New Hampshire.
When they accept that first Social Security tax.
It's not even when they accept the, so public employees, depending on their age, don't pay into Social Security.
That's true. Yeah,
So let's use the state of New Hampshire is once a public employee reaches the age of 65, depending on when they enrolled or became a public employee, they're no longer on the health system of New Hampshire. They get moved over to Medicare. Now, the taxpayer in the state of New Hampshire pays for their Part B and Part D premium. So they're paying for their Medicare.
Right.
Because it's really a Ponzi scheme.
Correct.
So, well, that's here. So now what's great is the state of New Hampshire went ahead, the state of New York went ahead and changed that. And they said, okay, what we're going to do is they mailed out a letter. If you don't mail this letter back,
You have to opt in.
So you have to opt in, reverse acceptance. If you don't opt in, if you do opt in, you're going on to what is known as a Medicare Advantage plan. A Medicare Advantage plan is great inside the state of New York because you can see that network of physicians.
Right. But if you're not in New York.
So now if you happen to have your retired police officer, city of New York, you move to Florida.
Good luck.
Guess what?
It's gone.
You don't have any more health insurance.
Wow.
Now, they said if you don't sign, this is what's great, you could stay in the old program. So most of the public employees in the state of New York said, okay, well, we can't sign because I happen to have a second home in Florida, Arizona, wherever it may be. I need health insurance that'll cross state lines. I need something larger than a network. And they said, that's great. What you need to do then is start paying the difference between what original Medicare is and what a Medicare Advantage plan is.
Oh.
So now when you look at, this is the beauty of our government and the beauty of our insurance system. So if you look at the history of the Medicare Advantage plans, starting in like, say, 2008, 2009, it was enacted by law in 2003, came into fruition 2006, 2007, started really screwing people, started being available and hurting people in 2008.
Is that when 44
yes,
became president?
It's quite amazing. There's no such thing as coincidences. When you look at Medicare Advantage plans, they've historically have gone up and given less benefit.
Correct.
Well, in the state of New York and across the country, what they did in 2021 to 2022 is they actually went down in price. Now, here's the beauty. Keep in mind, the people of New York, if they want to stay in their original plan, which is original Medicare, you have to pay the difference. So the Medicare Advantage plans dropped to about $6 a month. Why the supplemental plan in the state of New York went up by about 40%. And it's now on average about $400 to $500 a month.
So the people that stayed there are paying the big amount. These guys that didn't want to stay on the $6, and these guys pay for those guys.
Well, it's not just that. Now think of your retired police officer, firefighter, teacher. You have a spouse. The spouse also is part of that plan. So now the spouse has to pay
$400 a
$400.
quarter.
So now you're paying $800 a month. You went literally from
smokes.
December 2021, you didn't pay for anything. Now, January 2022, you're on the hook if you want to stay on this new plan. You're on the hook for $800.
So they have to go find their own plans
You can't.
now.
You're not allowed to.
What do you mean you're not allowed to?
So
You're on.
Hello, excuse me, this is the United States of America.
Doesn't
So
make any
I was
difference.
told.
Medicare-
And I have rights.
Medicare doesn't apply to your rights and or to the United States of America. It is strictly a cash cow for the federal government. That's why they want Medicare for all.
I just love poking him, don't you? This is reminiscent of a couple years ago.
Well, Medicare
You're getting the truth here, people. Pay attention.
Medicare is basically a cash cow that's going to save not only the federal government, but it's also going to bail out Social Security. It's going to make sure our budget's taken care of.
So what happens when they exhaust the amount of, round numbers, you get $2,000 a month from Social Security. Your insurance costs go up, and it's now your insurance cost is $2,400 a month.
Yes, it's happening now.
So do you now have to pay additional, and you get no Social Security?
All right. So this is the way it works. So what Karen is talking about is there a point that your Social Security check? So what people are never told about retirement planning, because the financial industry is actually in cahoots with the federal government, and yes, your financial advisor works for the government. They're not there to help you. They are there to actually expose every penny you have, so the federal government will reap the benefit. So ultimately, when you retire and you go onto Medicare, Medicare looks at the amount of income you generate.
Yep.
Now, the reason I brought up the state of New York, in order for Medicare not to be insolvent, Medicare has to be at about $300 a month for premiums.
Okay.
Now, they don't care about the general public. What they care about is if they jack the premiums up to $300 a month, the individual states have to pay for that. So
The states have to pay for
now,
it.
because
It's not the individual?
they care about the public employee. So the public employee that retired in the state of New York is getting all of their Medicare premiums paid for. The state of New Hampshire is paying for it. So as Medicare premiums increase, the state of New Hampshire can't pay because it's not budgeted.
Right.
So now if we can kick off all of these public employees off of their pension plan, we can now jack up the Medicare premiums as high as we want because the states don't have to pay for it. As we mentioned, the teachers union, because teachers are not very bright. I'm sorry. Teachers are not very bright. I want to work from home. Oh, okay, so we don't need
like
you.
my husband.
So now your pension system that we're supposed to be paying into, we don't need you. So we can get rid of all of you. We can keep one person to press a button to start the classroom that the kids who aren't learning
turn on the
anything now.
computer. Beep.
They turn the computer on. Now all the kids just go through a process. We don't need you.
Right.
Oh, and by the way, we hired that 5-year-old from China, the slave labor that was working for Nike and Bill Gates, and we're going to have them program all the information, and we're going to pay them $2 instead of $1. You're not needed. So we eliminate their pension, which now frees up the state of New Hampshire, the state of Massachusetts, whatever state you want. They no longer have to pay for the Medicare coverage or the pension coverage.
Right.
Now what can happen with Medicare premiums?
They can go up
Now how do you pay for your Medicare?
out of your Social Security.
Amazing.
But if your Social Security is no longer exceeded,
So what's happening now?
then you have to pay out of your own pocket.
So that's yes. So now the fun part of what the federal government did, the same time they created what these Medicare Advantage plans, which have been screwing people since 2007, they've also created this thing called IRMMA, the Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. So when you turn whatever age, so you're what, 71? Okay.
And looking very good about it. He does this all the time.
I have to.
He has to. He can't help it.
So
I know
we're never supposed to mention a woman's age, especially on air, but I was just compelled. She looks fantastic for 71.
I do. I do. And my feet don't reach that far, so I can't kick you.
Horrible for like 45, 46.
Do you want me to slip over here?
You hit him in the shins. Yeah.
Okay.
So when you reach the age of 65 or you become Medicare eligible and you're no longer covered by credible health insurance through an employer, spousal employer, you enroll in a Medicare. The first thing that Medicare does is they don't mail you the Medicare handbook. They don't send you a welcome card. They don't do anything other than ask the IRS how much money you're making. That's the first thing they do. And then they look at the amount of money you're making, and if you're making a certain amount of money, they increase your Medicare premiums even higher.
Wow.
And at the same time, when you're not looking, that next year, Congress lowers the amount of money that you can be making so that
it's coming into this big squeeze play that you get less and less and less.
So that's the fun part of it's not in the Build Back China plan. It's in another plan So the other scam that's happening now is prescription drugs. So you're starting to hear the media rant about prescription drugs are too high. Well, the former president that everyone in the country hated, this guy by the name of Donald Trump, actually enacted through
The mean tweeter.
He enacted what is known as the favored nation model. And what the favored nation model stated was every pharmaceutical company in the country, by decree of law, had to sell their drug to the U.S. citizen at the lowest price in the world. So everybody in the country would get the lowest price. To give an example, metformin, which is used for people type 2 diabetics or type 1 diabetics, it's about anywhere between $400 to $800 a month wherever you go. If you take your dog to the vet and your dog is a diabetic, it costs about 7 cents. But as a human in the United States, you're going to pay between $400 and $800. If you go to Canada, you're going to pay, I believe the last time I checked, it was like $4.12. If I'm in India, it's about 11 cents. So what the favored nation model stated was, if you're selling metformin in Vietnam for 1 cent, you have no choice.
You have to sell it
You
for
have
1
to sell
cent
it
here.
for 1 cent here.
Right.
So the president of the United States, your president, Joe Biden, he decided to scrap that in the month of January.
Last January.
No,
This
January. So January 2021, his not first, but his fifth action was to eliminate the favored nation model. Got rid of it.
Oh my
So
gosh.
now prescription drugs go through the roof. The reason
Right.
why this all ties into IRMMA. So now Congress has something to run on. And they're running on prescription drugs. They're bad, they're high. The Republicans screwed everybody. Donald Trump screwed everybody. And the general public, because they're stupid, believe it. So they're put in legislation, and it's, I forget who, it wasn't Manchin, I forget who put it in. Legislation was placed in at the end of 2020 through 2021. Timing was beautiful, impeccable, like they knew what they were talking about, to lower prescription drug costs. And you're going to start seeing more and more politicians run on, I'm going to lower prescription drugs costs. And there's actually a bill in Congress. But
How much more are they getting from Pfizer and all of those guys?
I don't go down. I don't go down that path. But here's the fun part. With inside the bill, how are they going to pay for lowering the prescription drug costs? They're going to change the IRMMA brackets so you pay more if you have more income. So you're not actually going to see a lower, and it's an actual bill. You can go on to Congress. It's congress.org or whatever. It's congress.gov. You can put in, just search IRMMA, and it'll bring up this one bill,
IRMMA.
Yes.
Yep.
Just
IRMMA.
So
you might look.
they're going to lower prescription drug costs, which means they're going to give Medicare the opportunity to tell Big Pharma, hey, we're not going to spend XYZ dollars on your particular drug, and this is great, twofold. So Big Pharma is going to say, okay, people on Medicare are not going to pay for metformin. They're not going to pay between $400 and $800. They're going to pay $100. But if you're not on Medicare, your metformin is going to be $1,200.
Oh, and the other part of that is that all your drugs are coming from China anyway.
Right.
Well, that's a whole other.
That's a whole other kettle of fish.
And, oh, by the way, guess what? Your Social Security is not supposed to be the only thing that you're relying on after you turn 65.
Correct.
Well,
It's only supposed to be 40% of your total retirement package. But most people don't know that. And the majority of your people
are relying on that.
That's the only income they have.
But here's the thing.
So what happens
So
when...
your traditional 401k that everyone's putting money into, that's not yours either.
I know.
You don't have that.
I know.
So back to IRMMA. So the IRMMA brackets are adjusted. They look at your income. They jack up your Medicare premiums. Your Medicare premiums come out of your Social Security check.
Correct.
So what's going to happen is eventually your Medicare premiums are going to outpace your Social Security benefit.
Right.
So now what do? You now have to pay the federal government
The difference.
the difference on a quarterly basis. So not
So
only
now you're getting double, triple, quadruple taxed.
So not only are you now not receiving a Social Security check, you're writing a check to the federal government on a quarterly basis, and then they're taxing you on the very same Social Security benefit you're not receiving.
Yeah.
And all this needs, and this is already happening, so it's not like this isn't happening. What the significance of what's going on in New York is you've now just, if you see it's Ohio, Illinois, and or California, if you see one of the three or all three make the same pension change this year in 2022, it's over. Because now, once the states are no longer paying for the Medicare premiums and the IRMMA surcharges of the public employees, now the federal government can jack the price up of Medicare as high as they want, and they can lower the IRMMA brackets as low as they want, and the individual state governments don't have to pay for it, just the general public.
So essentially, the medical system's going to go to hell in a handbasket.
That's a whole other side story, because what ends up happening is you give more power to Medicare. Now, Medicare is a reimbursement program, so if you're a physician that is doing God's work, because they are, that physician has to see a person that's on Medicare, then they submit a bill to Medicare. Now, the reason why healthcare costs go up, and it's very simple, ladies and gentlemen.
Is because they only get 10 cents on every
It's
dollar,
not
so
10
they have
cents.
to keep...
It's not 10 cents.
Okay,
So
it's
by
20.
by law, you're getting 80%. Medicare reimbursement is 80% of what the insurance companies are paying. So if you're charging 100 and the insurance company's only paying 80% or $80, you're only getting 80% of that
the 80 bucks.
Now, here's the problem. What's going on in the last 2 months is United Healthcare starting to buy up all of these medical coders and recorders. If you go on Twitter, Medical Quack is she's doing a wonderful job exposing everything that's happening. And I don't know her.
Quack.
I think it's at Medical Quack. And I don't know her name other than at Medical Quack, and she's doing a wonderful, wonderful job. So what's happening is, because of the power of United Healthcare, and because of now them purchasing all of these, I guess the easiest way to describe them is medical coders. They're the ones sending in all the bills. They're now telling the hospitals, we're not paying you 80% of 100%. We're paying you what we so choose. So if we choose that it's 60% of the 80% of the 100%,
That's what you get.
That's what you get, and you can't complain.
Because now they've also taken all of the individual doctors who had their individual practices and sucked them into HMOs.
Correct.
To suck them into the hospitals.
Correct.
That now they are
Have no
working
power.
for the hospitals and they have no power.
So now
Correct.
the doctors have no power, the hospitals have no power. So now the hospitals are realizing relatively quick that they're going to the federal government to complain about what's going on with the reimbursements from, and it's not, I'm not saying insurance companies are wonderful people or wonderful entities. That I'm not. I'm also not saying that they're bad. They're capitalistic organization.
They're making money.
United Healthcare might be evil. I'm not saying they are. They might be, but they're a capitalist
Company. Yeah.
They're trying to generate the most amount of revenue. The problem that you have in this equation is the protection that's supposed to be afforded by the hospital, by the government, is no longer there, because the government has a vested interest in United Healthcare driving down their reimbursement rate, because, again, Medicare pays 80% of that reimbursement rate. So if United Healthcare is paying less and less and less, which means now all insurance companies have to follow, because United Healthcare is going to, everyone's going to say, well, if United Healthcare is going to pay less, well,
Then I'm going to pay less too.
Well, it's not just I'm going to pay less. The thing would be, well, why wouldn't I go to Aetna, because Aetna's paying more? Well, Aetna's not generating enough revenue. United Healthcare is generating the revenue. They can buy more space. They can, whatever it may be, for advertising, marketing, expansion of company. So Aetna now has to lower the reimbursement rate.
Wow.
So if you really look at it all,
Yeah.
and you want to know whether or not somebody's making any money, look at the expansion. look at the number of hospitals that
The number
are
of
adding
offices and
adding equipment, adding all of these things because they can. So one of the things I think is really fascinating, and this is taking it to the schools, right? Your schools are constantly building new buildings and so forth, even though the population is declining, right?
Correct.
You go over here to Manchester to Trinity High School. Trinity High School has been there for decades. 500 students is their max. They are still operating in the same building they were operating in some 50 years ago.
Right.
Without a brand new building. And they're still teaching their students.
And their SAT scores are up high. And their literacy rates are up high. It's insanity.
Well, it's a private school.
It is a private
but they're
school,
still
but it's a
doing it.
Catholic school.
But
It's a parochial school.
well, public schools are doing their job, making sure that all the kids are going to be part of the DOC later on.
Well, they've already sold that, and we can go down that that path.
So
and
in the 4 minutes that we have left, so 3.5, we want to talk about the.
She's got notes.
I have a notes because I'm getting old.
She's like
the
a squirrel.
1099K,
72?
the eBay, PayPal, Venmo. So all that stuff you've been selling to make a little bit of money is going to come back and bite you in the tuchus because now they're going to report
So
what you
anything is
earned to the IRS.
So the fun part of what's happening with that piece of legislation or rule is basically anything that you're doing as what is known as they call it a side hustle. I'm old, so it used to be a second job.
Okay.
I had
Second job,
I have a
yeah.
second job, but they call it now a side
a
hustle.
side hustle?
Yes, let's call it a side hustle instead of a second job.
Less appetizing to go out and work?
So the problem now is if you make more than $600 with inside that parameter of say, side hustle or job, you have to report that to the federal government. Now, what's the big deal? Well, perfect example that I'll give is there is, believe it or not, and I don't understand this because at the end of the day, I'm an economist that studies healthcare data. That's all I am. I'm just an economist. They're selling sneakers that you can go to Amazon and buy. You could go to Amazon, buy a pair of Nikes for whatever price. And if you do, you're kind of an evil human being that likes little children in slave camps. But that's not here or there. You can buy a pair of Nikes for $150. Anyone can buy them. You can then put the pair of Nikes on sale for $300 and someone will buy them.
That's right.
It's insane. But people are doing this over and over and over again, thinking that they're not going to be taxed. Now, once they reach $600, they're going to be taxed. The reason why this piece of legislation's come in is the federal government realizes that they're losing tax dollars on these types of transactions. So they went to the banking infrastructure and said, any transaction, anybody depositing $600 or more, you have to report to us. So they can now track to figure out
Who's not paying tax on this extra money.
But you can't do that to small banks because you're putting on such a charge onto the community banks, local banks, regional banks, that they can't keep up to the Banks of America, Citizens. And you'll notice that Bank of America, Citizens, TD Bank, they were all for this because what it does is it crushes all the small banks. Small banks can't keep up. They have to pay for the reporting. It's ultimately what the Affordable Care Act
Therefore, you
did.
need to take your money and put it in the small banks so you undo the big banks.
Well, that's here. The small banks have no shot. They're gone. That's the Fed raises rates in 3 more years. It's all over.
It's all over.
So
Think about alternative
eBay,
monetary services.
So eBay, PayPal, Venmo, etc.
You're gonna have to start-
are snitching on you
Yes.
to the government, and so any extra money that you make you're going to be paying taxes
Well,
on.
that's what
You're-
they did
you're
to
gonna
the
have to
welfare
explain it.
system, too.
Yep.
You're going to have to explain, like, for perfect example, ex-wife, you pay her XYZ, she's going to have to explain where that extra $4,000 a month came from.
Yep.
There's legal documents, so she'll be all set.
Right.
But if you don't have those documents, you got
You're
that's
going to
income.
be in a bunch of hurt.
That's all. It's all about income.
All right. Well, this
Follow
is
the money. Follow
the money.
He
Exactly.
who pays the piper calls the tune.
So on that note, we definitely have to have Karen and Dan back really soon so we can continue ripping the Band-Aid off the injuries that the federal government is inflicting on us that we are totally oblivious to because we're too enmeshed in the fear porn of COVID at the moment. So fear porn.
You know what
Yes.
porn is?
Fear porn. So we're going to be back, and we will have you both back. Thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for coming, as always, Ms. Karen. And we will see you next week, same time, same channel, same craziness.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.